Welcome back to part 5 of my guide to Genetic Archives. Today I will be covering the event room on the way to Phageborn Convergence and its challenge, as well as Phageborn Convergence, the 5th boss of Genetic Archives. After you've killed both Phagemaw and Phagetech prototypes, the door leading to Phageborn Convergence will open and you will receive a new event in your event log asking you to fight your way through the archive defense system. While on the way, you will encounter the last type of trash mob guarding the newly opened door. Phageborn Dark Soul has infinite interrupt armors and can cast 2 uninterruptible alternating spells. First is Demolish, a 3.5 second cast spell that causes the Dark Soul to slam his hammer onto the tank, dealing massive damage to those inside the telegraph. Demolish does distributed damage, so the more people standing in the telegraph the less damage it does to individual players. It can be tanked by a single tank popping cooldowns, or 2 tanks without cooldowns. Second is Emanating Evil, a 6-second channeling spell that puts red circular telegraphs under random members that damages them over 10 seconds. The telegraphs are not contagious, but the damage stacks if you stand in multiple telegraphs. The Dark Soul has a lot of health points, so just rinse and repeat until it's dead. Clear the rest of the trash in the hallway and you'll arrive in front of the defense system room. The challenge for the room is Death from Above, which requires you to fight your way through the archive defense systems without anyone in the raid being hit by security defense beam. The defense beams are the red lasers coming from the ceiling that rotates around the room. Similar to the nanite-filled room, you can cheese the challenge by having a single person pull each of the 6 packs of trash out for the raid to kill. However, you have the additional risk of having that person getting hit by the defense beams and failing the challenge. Note that the trash mobs can also be damaged by the beams. The 6 packs of trash consist of 2 sets of 1 Phageborn Dark Soul guarding the entrance and exit of the room, 2 sets of Elder Phageborn Vilecaster and Phageborn Brute, and 2 sets of 2 Phageborn Dark Blades. Clear the room without getting hit by the defense beams and you will complete the challenge and receive 2 loots. Next, have a scientist capable of stealth or aggro drop make his or her way to the Phageborn Convergence room and summon the rest of the raid. If you cannot skip the trash, take the time to clear them. Unlike the Phagemaw and Phagetech prototypes rooms, if you skip the trash you do not have to go back and clear the Dark Soul outside of the boss room. You can resurrect at the graveyard without aggroing it. Phageborn Convergence is all about survival and execution. Although the encounter does not have a soft enrage timer, insufficient DPS can cause wipes during the encounter due to certain boss mechanics. Let me explain the fight's general mechanics before we jump into it. Phageborn Convergence consists of 4 out of 5 possible Phageborn councils. Noxmine the Insidious, aka the Sword Dude, Golgox the Life Crusher, aka the Hammer Dude, Fleshmonger Vartorg, aka Frog, Terox Blightweaver, aka Spider, and Ursoth Curseform, aka Floater. The composition of the conversions is random every week, but Sword and Floater are almost always present. I've seen instances where the composition is made out of Sword, Hammer, Frog, and Spider, but I've never seen one without Sword. Although the boss's starting positions change depending on the composition, you can move around the convergence room without starting the encounter as long as you do not aggro the bosses, and the bosses do not leash within the room. The encounter is made out of 2 phases, the normal phase and the middle phase. The normal phase is where all 4 councils are active and do their individual abilities, and the middle phase is where 3 out of the 4 councils cast channeling energy on the 4th council for a special ability after that council finishes casting Gathering Energy. Gathering Energy is a 20-second cast spell that can be interrupted by beating the 4th council's middle phase mechanic. Interrupting Gathering Energy puts all 4 councils into a 15-second moment of opportunity. The middle phase occurs every 90 seconds, including the time the councils spend casting Gathering Energy and sitting in the moment of opportunity. After 2 councils die, floating mushrooms will appear near the center of the room that will explode like proximity mines upon contact. After 3 councils die, a hard enrage timer is triggered and a laser wall will slowly fill up the room from the outer wall to the middle, eventually killing the entire raid. The encounter has no enrage timer up until this point. The challenge for Phageborn Convergence is Preemptive Strike, which requires the raid to defeat the encounter without letting any of the councils finish Gathering Energy. There's nothing special about this challenge. If you do the fight correctly and interrupt every Gathering Energy, you will complete this challenge. Now we'll explain what each of the council does during the normal and middle phases. Sword can cast 3 abilities during the normal phase. First, he summons stationary ice stalks that rotate slowly in a circle, dealing damage in a frontal cone after a short cast time. Second, he casts Essence Rot, a 3-second cast spell that spawns waves of telegraphs that moves across the room in the direction of one of the 3 other councils. Note that the second wave in the middle splits into 2 waves after traveling a certain distance. Lastly, Sword periodically casts Equalize, which distributes the total health points of the convergence equally among each of the 4 councils. During the middle phase, Sword summons 4 Nox Swarm incubators in the 4 quadrants of the inner circle: northwest, northeast, southeast, and southwest. Each incubator has 255.1k HP and must be killed to interrupt Sword's gathering energy. If you do not kill the incubators in time, each of the remaining incubators will release adds on the raid. Hammer has an aura and 3 abilities during the normal phase. His aura is Reinforced Form, which reduces damage taken by nearby allies by 50%. His first ability is an 180-degree frontal cleave that knocks away those who get hit. Hammer also casts Demolish, a 3.5-second cast spell that causes him to slam his hammer down on the tank. This is the same Demolish the Phageborn Dark Soul does. Lastly, Hammer periodically roots the tank. With the exception of the first Demolish, Hammer almost always casts Root first, followed immediately by the Cleave and Demolish. During the middle phase, Hammer gains 20 interrupt armors. Each interrupt will cause him to deal AoE damage to the entire raid. To interrupt Hammer's gathering energy, the raid must systematically space out the interrupts, as having quick successions of 3 to 4 interrupts will wipe the raid. Note that casting a single ability capable of destroying 2 interrupt armors such as Tier 4 Crush or Gate only deals 1 wave of AoE damage. Therefore, the most efficient way to interrupt Hammer is to have 5 groups of 2 players using 2 IA abilities. If you fail to break Hammer's 20 interrupt armors by the end of the gathering energy, Hammer will pulse AoE damage until he is interrupted, wiping the raid in a matter of seconds. Frog has a buff and 2 abilities during the normal phase. His buff is Symbiotic Pustules, which causes Frog to shoot out homing projectiles at those who damage him from ranged. The pustules do not travel fast and fade after traveling a certain distance. Frog can cast Mighty Leap, a 1-second cast spell that causes him to jump onto someone and reset aggro. This can kill the healer. Frog can also cast Strain Rage, a 2-second cast spell that deals damage in a large circular telegraph under him and in a series of line telegraph in a circle in quick succession. This can kill a light armor healer if it crits. Frog has no interrupt armor, so his spell should be interrupted every time. Note that Frog auto attacks in the frontal cone, so be sure to stand behind him if you're not the tank. During the middle phase, Frog gains a 1.5 million health point absorption shield. To interrupt Frog's gathering energy, simply break the absorption shield before the 20-second cast is finished. Failure to break the shield will cause Frog to pulse AoE raid damage, wiping the raid in a few seconds. Spider likewise has an aura and casts 2 abilities during the normal phase. Spider's aura is Vital Notification Field, which causes those standing in close proximity to take periodic damage and reduce healing received by 100%. Spider periodically casts Stitching Strain, a 4-second interruptible cast that puts a dispellable heal over time on all 4 councils. Spider has 4 interrupt armors during the cast and the cast should be interrupted. Letting one go off is not the end of the world, but the heal should really be interrupted every time. Note that the Spider gains an interrupt armor back every 2 seconds, so time your interrupts. With the exception of the first normal phase, where Spider will cast 2 Stitching Strains, Spider will always cast 1 Stitching Strain during each normal phase, typically 5 to 10 seconds after the moment of opportunity. Spider can also cast Blighted Reflection, which puts 8 like red circular telegraphs on the random players in Spider's range, which is about a quarter of the room, and the telegraph does damage over time and can infect other players. Simply cleanse the debuff off. During the middle phase, Spider summons 20 corrupted genetic pods in the center area. Each pod has 45.2k HP. Kill them all to interrupt Spider's gathering energy. Lastly, Floater has 3 abilities during the normal phase. First, Floater casts long-range small circular telegraphs around the room, dealing 10,000 damage to those caught inside after the telegraphs complete. Second, Floater can drop smaller circular telegraphs near him that persist for a short while, dealing damage and snaring those inside. Finally, Floater can cast Fester Bomb on random players, tethering that player to an egg that explodes after 10 seconds, killing that player and those inside the telegraph. The egg has 121.8k HP and can either be killed by the raid or be broken by CC break abilities. During the middle phase, Floater gains 10 interrupt armors, disarms the entire raid, and summons slow-moving circular telegraphs around him. Those who are disarmed will take periodic damage, and the floating telegraphs also disarm those who get damaged by them. To interrupt Floater's gathering energy, the raid must break through the interrupt armors. Note that Floater gains 1 or 2 interrupt armor every second, so time your interrupts. The raid can afford to take 5 to 10 seconds to pick up their weapons and gather for interrupts if you do not want to use your CC break abilities to regain your weapon. So as you can probably imagine, your strategy will largely depend on the composition. Note that there are multiple ways to defeat each composition. I will go over the strategy for each of the 5 compositions and showcase kills from the last 3 compositions. Feel free to skip ahead to the composition that matches or most closely resembles yours. I will begin with the most improbable composition, Hammer, Frog, Spider, and Floater. I've never seen this composition and cannot find a kill video with this composition from other guilds. You will need 2.5 to 3 tanks and 3 to 4 healers. Have 1 tank and 1 healer on Hammer and Frog, while having a DPS engineer range tank the Spider with a healer. You can choose to use a full tank for Spider or have an additional healer for Hammer if you are confident in your raid's ability to break Frog's absorption shield during its middle phase. Floater does not need a tank. Tank the councils at their respective spawn spots. Have DPS start on Hammer while having enough ranged people on Spider to interrupt heals. You need 5 interrupts, so 1 or 2 on top of the tank and healer is enough. Have DPS help take damage from Demolish and keep DPSing Hammer until he's dead. Since there is no equalize from Sword, this should occur fairly quickly. After Hammer dies, have the Hammer group move to the Floater and DPS down to around 200k. Next, split the group into 2, melee going to Frog and range going to Spider. DPS both down to around 200k, pull the Spider to the center of the room and wait for the next middle phase. Finally, interrupt the next gathering energy, kill the council or councils in the middle, which depends on whether Spider is the one gathering energy, and quickly finish off the remaining councils. The second composition is perhaps the hardest one: Sword, Hammer, Frog, and Spider. You will need 3 to 4 tanks and 4 healers. Have 1 tank on Hammer and Frog. Have either 2 heavy armored DPS tank the Sword and Spider, or have additional tanks for them. You can also try to have an engineer tank both Sword and Spider together, though I do not recommend this. The number of tanks you will want to have largely depends on whether you'll have enough DPS to interrupt Frog's gathering energy. Assign 1 healer to each of the tanks. Have DPS start either on Hammer or Sword while having enough ranged people on Spider to interrupt heals. The advantage of having DPS on Hammer is being able to share demolish damage, while the advantage of having DPS start on Sword is not having to worry about constantly dodging essence rods. If you do start on Hammer, I recommend switching the positions of Sword and Frog so Sword is at its max distance away from Hammer. And if you start on Sword, I recommend having an actual tank on him due to threat issues. Note that the tank should face Sword towards the center of the room while having DPS stand directly behind it. That way the DPS will never have to dodge essence rods. Meanwhile, the tank should roll into the boss during the essence rods casts so he or she does not get hit. No matter which council you DPS first, their HP will periodically be equalized by the Sword. Ultimately, you want to kill the Hammer first, as it has the highest chance of killing a tank and has the hardest middle phase mechanic. Of course, the first kill will happen much later than the previous composition due to equalize. After Hammer dies, have DPS go to or stay on Sword. DPS the councils down to around 200k using Sword's equalize. Drag Sword to the middle and wait for the next middle phase. Finally, interrupt the next gathering energy, kill the council or councils in the middle, and finish off the remaining councils. The third composition is perhaps the easiest one: Sword, Frog, Spider, and Floater. You will need 3 tanks and 3 healers. Have 1 tank and 1 healer on Sword, Frog, and Spider, and have DPS start on Sword. Make sure to have enough people on Spider to interrupt heals. Keep DPSing Sword until councils are equalized to around 10 to 15%. Keep DPSing and wait for the next middle phase. If Frog, Spider, or Floater is put in the middle, interrupt gathering energy and kill that council. After the first council dies, stay on the Sword and DPS the councils down to around 200k using equalize. Drag the Sword to the middle and wait for the next middle phase. Finally, interrupt the next gathering energy, kill the council or councils in the middle, and finish off the remaining councils. The fourth composition is Sword+Hammer+Frog+Floater. You will need 3 tanks and 3 to 4 healers. Have 1 tank and 1 healer on Sword, Hammer, and Frog. Put an additional healer on Hammer if need be. Like the second composition, you can either have DPS start on Hammer to make tanking easier, or on Sword to make dodging essence rots easier. Keep DPSing Sword or Hammer and find an opportunity to kill Hammer first. This can be achieved by either interrupting Hammer's gathering energy and killing him during the moment of opportunity, or have DPS go kill him after his HP gets low enough from Equalize. After Hammer dies, have the DPS go to or stay on Sword. DPS the council is down to around 200k using Sword's Equalize, drag Sword to the middle, and wait for the next middle phase. Finally, interrupt the next gathering energy, kill the council or councils in the middle, and finish off the remaining councils. The last composition is Sword, Hammer, Spider, and Floater. You will need 2.5 to 3 tanks and 3 to 4 healers. Have 1 tank and 1 healer on Sword and Hammer, while having a ranged DPS or another tank and healer on Spider. You can either have DPS start on Hammer to make tanking easier, or on Sword to make dodging essence rods easier. Make sure to have enough people on Spider to interrupt heals. Keep DPSing Sword and find an opportunity to kill Hammer first. This can be achieved either by interrupting Hammer's gathering energy and killing him during the moment of opportunity, or have DPS go kill him after his HP gets low enough from Equalize. After Hammer dies, have DPS go to or stay on Sword. DPS the councils down to around 200k using Sword's Equalize, drag Sword to the middle, and wait for the next middle phase. Finally, interrupt the next gathering energy, kill the council or councils in the middle, and finish off the remaining councils. After you've defeated Phageborn Convergence, don't forget you will be able to purchase weapons from the Elder Gem vendor. The last part of this guide will cover Dread Phage Omna, the last boss of Genetic Archives and the 4 mini-bosses leading up to it. Please like and subscribe if you find this video helpful. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.